Okay, welcome to Unit 5, Video 3. In this lecture, we are going to talk about the intended consequence of socialization. And because you've all gone through this with your parents, you can think about what your parents were trying to get you to do. When they were socializing you, what they were trying to get you to do is be able to have a sense of right and wrong about things that wasn't dependent on them being there. It was for you to be able to, again, socially control yourself when they were not away. Or, I'm sorry, when they were away, when they were not with you. In other words, the answer to the question of what is the intended consequence of socialization, it is for you to develop a conscience right inside your head. Now, consciences, everybody is comfortable with the idea that they have a conscience. What is a little bit uncomfortable is to think about this conscience, and conscience means in sociology exactly what it means in life. It's an internal sense of right and wrong. It's just the implication of where it comes from is a little bit different. In this case, what we're saying is you get put into this machine. Thoughts and behaviors are what are produced, but some of those thoughts, some of them, are your internal sense of right and wrong. In other words, while we think of, and rightly so, think of a conscience as an internal sense of right and wrong. I mean, it is inside my brain right now. It's probably more accurate to say it is an internalized sense of right and wrong. Your sense of right and wrong is this stuff put into you. What your parents were, socializing you to have was a culture. This is the things that exist in the world, and this is how you should navigate them, how you should go about them. And an interesting point, and I can't remember if I made this earlier in the semester, this CC obviously stands for collective consciousness. In some textbooks, the collective consciousness is a term that comes from the French sociologist Émile Durkheim, who, if you ever have to read anything by him, it is brutal. Read the introduction and conclusion. The collective conscience is his idea, but he wrote in French, and the English words collective consciousness are a translation from the French. The French term, and I don't speak French, so I don't know exactly what it is, can be translated either conscience or consciousness. So the idea here is that this, which makes sense, right? This is our sense of right and wrong. This is a collective conscience. And what we have is all of us basically having overlapping consciences. The collective consciousness is complicated and messy, so our overlap might not be perfect. But I would imagine right now, you and I both think cannibalism is wrong. We both think eating dogs is wrong. We both think that individuals should be free to do whatever they want to do as long as they're not hurting other people. Chances are most of us believe that. You shouldn't be able to just take things from other people just because you're physically stronger than somebody else. None of those are inevitable things that human beings would have, but we all overlap on that. Why? Because we all were socialized to have the same culture. This conscience that exists inside of you comes from agents of socialization who were teaching kids right from wrong in very, very similar ways. All right, so first major point about this is that your conscience, the whole point of socialization so that you can socially control yourself from inside, the first point of it is that it is an internalization of the collective consciousness. The symbolic universe also has an important part to play in that because it also teaches us this is how we should understand the world. But it's internalized is the first big point. Second big point, and a kind of a deeper, slightly deeper point, is that when your conscience sort of pricks at you when you're contemplating something that you think is not the right thing to do, you have an emotional reaction to that, right? And that's good. That suggests that this whole idea of social control has really taken root. But what's interesting about it is that this is that conscience, that prickling sense of shame or guilt that you have, is your emotions that are intrinsic to you as a human being being channeled through this machine. You feel a sense of guilt or shame about something because of about something because your society has told you you should. It's the reason that people could stone girls to death for trying to get an education and not have a sense of guilt or shame about it. In their machine, that was the right thing to do. Their consciences wouldn't feel pricked by that. For most of us, your conscience you wouldn't feel that sort of sense of shame or guilt or revulsion about the idea of eating a hamburger. But in large parts of India, that feeling that you would have about eating a dog would come to them about eating a hamburger. Again, there's nothing intrinsically right or wrong about eating any of those animals. It's what your society has told you is right or wrong, and how then your emotional equipment that exists because you're a human gets channeled through that machine. That's a deep thought. The third, and you can kind of probably guess where this one is going to go, is that your sense of right and wrong, which means how your emotions would be channeled, would be different if you were raised in a different society. I hate contemplating this because it is hard for me to deal with the idea that I would have been a person who would have stoned a girl to death for trying to get an education had I been raised in that society. But there's absolutely nothing other than my own American egocentrism in thinking that I'm an individual first. There's no scientific evidence that that would have been the case, that I would have been the one person who would have been like, no, I think this is wrong. The odds are I wouldn't have been, and that's a disturbing thing to think about. And that's where I'm going to leave you with this. The intended consequence is your conscience. That's the whole point of socialization, to get you to have the sense of guilt and shame that are appropriate for succeeding in our society. Importantly, if you feel those about only the things society tells you to feel them about, you're going to walk into this society and not feel all that bad about stepping over a homeless person. Our society doesn't tell you you should be racked with guilt and shame for having more than that person. And I'm not telling you you should. I'm saying the fact that you don't is because our society has told you that's their fault. They should have done better. All right, next time, what we'll come back to is two unintended consequences. They are direct consequences of the socialization process, and they're both going to be as disturbing or more as this conscience thing. But they're not what is intended. We'll deal with those next time.